So the rules, Ray Brown's from Cabrillo College in California, in Santa Cruz, California, Aptos, California actually. His rules are as follows. If you have a dominant chord that's resolving correctly, it's going 5-1. And it's a dominant 13th with a flat 9, sharp 11, any combination thereof. You can ascend, starting with a whole step up a diminished scale, starting on the 7th or 9th of the target chord that you're resolving to. If you're descending, you can start on the 5th or the 3rd. You're also going to begin with a whole step and then alternate whole step, half step. So when you're playing, if your chord progression goes G7 to C and you want to play a G, you want to play that diminished sound, you're going to go G to F, and then it would be really easy if we had not guitars but unitars. That's what Mick Goodrick calls them. If you play just on one string, pretty easy to just follow the whole steps and half steps. A little bit trickier when you're changing strings, and then the 3rd string and 2nd string thing screws everything up. But again, as you're descending, the first thing you play is a whole step and then go from there. So in position, we're still working from that 2-string pattern. You're just going to start, you could start on your index finger, and that would get you to C major 7. It could get you to C minor 7 too, but it's going to be a little bit harder when you're descending, starting on the 3rd or the 5th. It's going to be hard to start on the 3rd unless you tweak it a little bit at the end. So that's the application of the diminished scale. We've got our G13 with a flat 9, and I'm just going to go up, but I'm only going to get up to the B where I started. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and back on beat 1, and that's where the C major 7 chord resolves. So it's kind of cool because you're playing 8th notes, and you start and end on, you start on a good note that's good with the G chord, and you end on a good note that's good with the C major 7 chord. So it's sort of like magic. So that's starting on the 7th, and then we could also start on the 9th, and we'd end on that. Right? So there's other, this is the magic fingering because it's easy and you stay in one position, and it's 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4. But you should definitely learn the other ones too. There's lots of other little wiggly fingerings that you can work out. So from your G7 chord, I think it's kind of easy to pick these two. I think most people can find that 3rd of the chord, and then this is the 5th of the chord, right? So it's pretty. You can think. This brings me to another thought. You can think in terms of the starting chord or the target chord. Ray always says think in terms of the target chord because then it makes it a little easier to make sure you land on a good note. So we're starting on the 7th of the C or the 9th of the C and playing 8th notes. Okay, for descending, and the mnemonic that I don't know if he told us this or if I came up with this. When you're ascending, 7th and 9th, those are notes that are high in the chord, right? As opposed to the 5th and the 3rd, which are low in the chord if we're spelling the chord 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So 7 and 9 are high in the chord. If you're descending, you can use the, you can start on the 3rd or the 5th of the chord and descend. And one thing that's interesting is you're always going to start with a whole step. So when you go up, you're going to go whole step, half step. When you go down, you're going to go whole step down and then half step. So back to our, we could do it up here. This was G13 flat 9 going up. Oops. And then we could do G13 going down. So this one might work better with that root on the 6th string, visually anyway. Kind of a cool one. And that's from the 5th of the chord, and then from the 3rd of the chord, you're going to end up with a shift there. But you can hear how that works nicely over this guy. And then you could even... If they don't tell tell you anything about the 13, it's a little more dangerous to play that sound because the comper might decide to put a flat 13 in there and you're going to get a little bit of a clash. Also, I've noticed when you play a natural 13 and the chord resolves to a minor chord, in other words, you play G, 13, flat 9, and you go to C minor, there's an interesting sound of that half step falling from E natural to E flat, right? If you resolve to this C minor chord. It also probably wipes out the B unless you want to land on a B, like if you want to land, you know. So when you're ascending, you can start on the B, but keep in mind you're going to end on a B, and if your chord is going G13 to C minor, you're going to go, oops. And if you've heard the Pat Metheny lesson that's floating around the internet,
with the exception of major sevenths on minor seventh chords, I can pretty much hear all 12 tones on any chord now.
That's basically the one sound that he can't get away with. Schofield can play anything, right? Like if it says G13, he would. So that's playing the major 7 on a G7 chord, which seems funny. Like how can you get away with playing, you know, the F sharp? But as a passing tone, it totally works, and it's pretty hip. And actually, all the bebop players add major sevenths to their dominant 7th chords, which is like a whole nother lesson.
The reason I suddenly mentioned John Schofield is that I had mentioned him earlier, but that got edited out. And I saw a Schofield clinic when I was in college, and Schofield said dominant chords are hard because you can play everything on a dominant 7th chord. What he meant was you can play the root clearly, you can play the flat 9, the natural 9, the sharp 9, the major 3rd, the 4th, the sharp 11, the 5th. Basically, you can play everything, and Schofield said you can play everything except the major 7th, and I play that sometimes too.
But Pat says the one thing he can't get away with is playing a major 7 on a minor 7. That's one thing that's really kind of hard to make it work. So if your chord progression is going G13 to C minor, you might not want to start on the major 7th. It would still be cool to start on the 9th, because then you're going to end up with like a C minor 9 chord, right? Which would be kind of cool. So targeting that D to resolve to the C minor would be cool. And when you're descending, if you target the 5th, you'll be cool, like coming down from the G, which is the 5th of C minor. That's going to work, but it's going to be hard to get away with starting on E and descending, because you're going to you would have to adjust, and that last note is actually not in the diminished scale, so totally possible, but takes a little bit more tweaking to get there.